on September 12th. We were joined by filmmaker Tom Konkle to discuss the recently announced changes to the Academy Award eligibility criteria. And towards the end of the discussion, the conversation shifted to when film production can resume, and what form it might take in a pandemic world. Case in point, Matt Reves' Batman. After filming just 1/3 of the movie, production was put on hold back in March, and it only resumed now in September, not on location as was originally planned, but in a controlled studio setting that was supposed to be secure. Even so, the Batman himself, Robert Pattinson, turned out to be infected, so after a whopping 1 week of filming, production was shut down again, and who knows when it will resume. Good news is that Pattinson is young and reasonably fit, so chances are he'll be fine. But what if the star is older or otherwise in a high-risk group, like say Patrick Stewart? What then? How will the risk of costly production shutdowns, like what we've seen on Batman, affect the industry going forward?
COVID continues to be a problem that shuts down a production. People are going to be very hesitant to insure it and be very hesitant to tie their money up for this long.
With so many productions shutting down just as soon as they start up, like the Batman and stuff, how do you think this is going to affect productions going forward? Since even in the digital realm, not just theatrically, as we keep reminding our audience, not much is going to get released until they can start getting back into production and start creating more product. So how do you think this is going to affect things overall going forward, guys?
Yeah, I mean, to further add, whenever you have a cast member that falls under an illness of this type, there's quarantine protocols. So now they have to figure out, okay, we've got to wait 2 weeks to see if anyone else has it. If no one else has it, in the case of Batman, luckily they can just get the stunt guy to come in, stand in all the parts. The rest of the actors can do their stuff. There's workarounds to it. And I mean, I made a joke of this earlier, like weeks ago, but I actually think they're literally doing that. I think they are photo mapping Pattinson's face onto the stunt guy for most of the scenes anyways. So I don't think they're really worried too much about him being there. I think the only time he's ever going to be in the suit is really just a cowl and a chest piece, and it's just going to be a close-up shot of him talking, and the rest is going to be the stunt guy. So they do have the benefit of working around a lot of Pattinson not being part of the production if they so have to. If the majority of the film is him in the suit, they'll be okay. The insurance companies will pretty much encourage them to do any workaround they can, and same will the studios. And I'm sure Matt Reves will be like, yeah, it's not great to not have him there all the time, but at least we can get this stuff done in the meantime, and it not be a waste of money completely. Especially if AT&T and Warner Brothers wants to commit to finishing this project, which I believe they do. That being said, it's just we know so little about this virus, even to this day, that it's going to hamper a lot of productions, going to hamper a lot of people. I feel like the only option for producing and getting stuff out would be on the animated side of things. Like that's the only kind of thing where it can be kind of safe. And we're probably going to have a gap of live action productions for, I think, a short while, but not too much. Yeah. I think people are still going to be willing to take the risk. I know there's a lot of actors that have their own petitions going saying, listen, I will risk getting infected if I could just go to work. And I know there's a lot of crew that share the same thing because number one, they want the job. Number two, they want something to do. And number three, a lot of actors and a lot of crewmen, they all have finite careers. They never know when they're going to get the next job, especially on the acting side. Like that's why when you start getting a little bit of a role on your career, you're able to ask for more money because there's always a chance you're not going to get a job after that last one, and you got to live off that cash for as long as you can, or else you start teaching acting classes or voice classes or improv classes, and you don't really want them. They don't want to go that way. So, yeah, there has to be some give and take here. I don't really know what's in store for the future at this point. It's really weird. It's never happened before like this.
Yeah, and you don't want to panic. That's the thing. Is like look at the death numbers, not just if it's a case-demic versus a pandemic. If it's cases of it, but people are recovering, you should have a different policy, different protocols in place where it's like, yes, people are going to get it. It's terrible. They need to recover. But look at the death rate. If stars aren't perishing of it, they simply get it and then they get better, like Tom Hanks. Insurers have to stop being spooked. I heard that insurers were spooked They felt there would be $100 billion in payouts, pandemic payouts this year if something happened. And so they back away from insuring studio productions, but independent producers too. You can't raise finance without insurance. You can't have anything disrupted because then you can't finish the movie, and you've tied up people's money. There has to be an insurance component, but you also can't just freak out and close down the entire business forever, because as Script was saying, people have there's an expiration date on both the project, on your career as an actor. People want to work. So we have to find a balance where every time we have to accept there's going to be cases and figure out what are the protocols to keep people reasonably safe, but also we can't just stop. You can't go, well, Batman did it, we're going to shut down, that's it, no more productions, because that will kill the business. And there needs to be a happy medium, and someone has to rise to the challenge of ensuring these things in a riskier world. Yes, managing risk is what insurance is about. Finance is about managing risk. Are we really doing the best job we can to manage the risk?
Yeah, and there's not going to be a whole lot of movies of actors in spacesuits that they're trying to use as a workaround for this, because it's just not going to happen. People are going to get tired of that. So, and
even Batman's a great example, because you said you can map him on the outfit and do all that. Well, that's great, but I'm not making Batman, so I can't map someone onto it. I don't have that fallback. I want to do a film where people are interacting, or you have a love scene, or you have something. We've got to figure that protocol out, but there has to be insurance available. And right now, for independent, good luck finding a company that will insure you.
Yeah. About that, the insurance thing, and also what you said about having a finite career. We mentioned this briefly before we went live, but I want to repeat that so everyone can hear it. Basically, what I've heard about Star Trek Picard Season 2 is that for the moment, that's dead in the water. For one thing, Amazon are very unkeen to fund it because they're so unhappy with Season 1. But in addition to that, Patrick Stewart is more than 80 years old, and they can't get him insured. No one wants to insure it. What do you think is what have you heard about that specifically, if anything, and what do you feel about that general situation? Stars that are in their, well, we say senior years.
Yeah, I think what's going to happen is some sort of supplemental insurance. I think there's a thing called PRIA. It's Pandemic Risk Insurance Act, which is being spotlighted by a couple of senators, where in order to produce a series like Picard, at least cost effectively, there has to be a cap as to what you pay out. And because Patrick Stewart is front and center, were you to lose him, to the disease, or God forbid he dies, you would have an insurance claim that would be so huge it would bankrupt the companies. And what's going to happen is something is worked out with this act that, almost like the FDIC works, where up to a certain cap you are covered, so that you won't be wiped out with $100 million. You ruined Patrick Stewart's life and career. He died. You can't have that happen. I think given that his age is also a risk factor, it does present a huge problem of, do you shoot him perhaps in isolation and not have him interacting with many people, which compromises the story, compromises the acting, but keeps him safe? It's a very difficult thing to proceed with the same kind of aesthetic that you've normally been shooting with an older person, when you have this risk you can't manage. Because, as you say, without him, you don't have a show, and he's in his 80s. So even in a non-COVID setting, you're taking a risk. You're building a show around someone who hopefully lives another 10 years. I would love for him to live forever, but that's the reality. And now, with COVID being a contagious disease that affects people like that, I think it will be very difficult to make an argument that it is a good investment to get a very expensive policy around an older actor who may get COVID because he's interacting with a lot of guest stars, even in a controlled environment.
In other words, there's going to be very few productions starring the, shall we say, chronologically gifted, like Patrick Stewart.
Yeah. Unfortunately,
Yeah. Well, I mean,
and
it's always been risky anyways, because in order for them to qualify for insurance, they have to get a physical. And a person at that age, I mean, the only actor I know who kind of passes every time is William Shatner, and he's 90.
yeah, that's true.
Yeah.
And it's sad. I don't believe in any kind of ageism. I think older people have as much to say and have the same concerns as anyone. I'm just looking at it from an insurance and finance standpoint. The excuse of COVID has raised the specter of, do we assume that risk? And, as someone just commented in here, what if the actor dies of it? Then you have to prove that the production was what caused it. And then the onus is on them to pay out a very substantial payment, which will end the show more than likely.